I am Jason Miller, 28 years old, and until last month I thought I had a normal family. Despite my success as a tech executive, my parents never quite approved of my career path. Nothing prepared me for that Thursday evening when I unlocked my penthouse door, kicked off my shoes, and saw my phone light up with 58 missed calls and 20 messages. The last one simply read, "Your stuff is in the garage now. Ryan needs your room more than you do." My childhood erased in a single text. Before I dive into how this family betrayal unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to see more stories about standing up for yourself when family crosses the line. Growing up in suburban Michigan shaped much of who I am today, though not always in positive ways. My childhood home was a neat two-story colonial, with a well-maintained lawn and strict rules to match. My parents, Frank and Diana Miller, ran our household with unwavering authority and traditional values that left little room for discussion or deviation. From an early age, I understood the hierarchy in our family. My sister Melissa, 4 years my senior, held the coveted position as the golden child. She excelled in activities my parents valued, playing piano at church functions, joining the debate team, and eventually pursuing a business degree at the local university where my father had connections. Her achievements were celebrated with enthusiasm, her school events attended without question, her opinions valued at the dinner table. My interests were different. Computers fascinated me from the moment my elementary school got its first computer lab. I would spend hours learning programming basics, creating simple games, and exploring the potential of technology. These pursuits were viewed with suspicion in our household. Playing with computers, my father would say dismissively, "That will never put food on the table like a real career." The family business was Miller's Hardware, a store my grandfather had started and my father had expanded to 3 locations across the county. It was understood, though, never directly stated, that I would eventually join the business. My aptitude for technology was treated as a phase I would outgrow, not a genuine career path. The store supported this family for 2 generations, my father would remind me. It paid for this house, your clothes, your food. There is dignity in continuing what your grandfather built. High school brought the first major conflicts. While my peers received congratulations for college acceptance letters, my parents reacted to my computer science scholarship with visible disappointment. 4 years wasted on something with no future, my mother sighed when I showed them the award letter. "Your cousin Thomas is already assistant manager at the Northside store, and he is only 19. Despite their disapproval, I left for college, determined to forge my own path. Those 4 years were transformative, challenging coursework, inspiring professors and peers who shared my excitement about technology. For the first time, my interests were validated rather than dismissed. After graduation came the lean years that tested my resolve. My first job at a struggling startup paid barely enough to share an apartment with 3 roommates. 16-hour workdays were common, fueled by ramen noodles and the belief that we were building something important. When the company folded 18 months later, I spent weeks sleeping on friends' couches, taking freelance coding jobs, and ignoring my father's voicemails suggesting it was time to stop playing around and come home. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. An app I had developed on weekends, a tool to help small businesses manage inventory, caught the attention of a venture capitalist at a networking event. Within 6 months, I had funding, a small team, and a growing user base. 3 years later, when a major tech company acquired us, I joined their leadership team as a product development director and eventually rose to vice president. Financial success did not improve my relationship with my parents. If anything, it highlighted the fundamental differences in our values. They viewed my career as lucky rather than earned, temporary rather than sustainable. Phone calls home became exercises in deflection, with my mother asking when I would settle down and my father suggesting I should invest my computer money in expanding the family hardware business. Meanwhile, my sister Melissa had followed the expected path, marrying Ryan shortly after college and taking a management position at the family store. But their perfect narrative began showing cracks when Ryan lost his accounting job due to corporate restructuring, the first of many positions he would cycle through. Each time there was an explanation that absolved him of responsibility: difficult boss, toxic workplace, company mismanagement. As Ryan's employment became increasingly sporadic, My parents' support remained unwavering. They offered financial help, job connections, and endless understanding. Ryan is going through a tough time, my mother would explain. He has such potential, but the right opportunity hasn't come along yet. The contrast to their treatment of my early struggles was stark. When I had faced setbacks, the message was clear: this was the consequence of poor choices. For Ryan, setbacks were unfortunate circumstances happening to a deserving person. Despite the strained relationship, I maintained contact and provided financial support when needed. I paid for my father's knee surgery when their insurance denied coverage. I covered the property tax shortfall when the hardware store had a difficult year. I sent my mother on a cruise for her 60th birthday, her first vacation in 15 years. These gestures were accepted with minimal acknowledgement, treated almost as obligations rather than generosity. This was the complex family dynamic I had learned to navigate from a distance. My visits home became less frequent, usually limited to major holidays and family events. My childhood bedroom remained largely unchanged, a museum to a younger version of myself that my parents seemed to prefer. The room contained remnants of my past debate trophies, science fair ribbons, and the desktop computer where I had written my first lines of code. I had no idea that this tenuous balance was about to collapse, or that my childhood bedroom would become the battlefield for a family confrontation that had been brewing for decades. The day that everything changed had begun ordinarily enough. I arrived at the office by 7:30 in the morning, preparing for back-to-back meetings about our newest product launch. The development team had encountered integration issues that required immediate attention, and I spent hours in the conference room working through solutions with engineers and project managers. By 6 in the evening, we had resolved the critical problems and established a new timeline for the release. I finally stepped out to grab dinner from the cafe across the street, leaving my phone charging in my office. The technological irony was not lost on me. A tech executive disconnected from his devices for nearly 10 hours. It was only after returning to my office around 8 that I checked my notifications. The screen displayed a backlog that made my stomach drop: 58 missed calls and 20 text messages. Most were from my mother and sister, with a few from my father. My first thought was that someone had been injured or worse. Heart racing, I scrolled to the earliest message from that morning. Mom, 9:13 a.m. Jason, call me as soon as you get this. We need to discuss something important about the house. Melissa, 9:47 a.m. Mom said she called you. Call her back. It is about Ryan. Mom, 10:22 a.m. Jason, this is urgent. Please call home. The messages continued, growing increasingly insistent throughout the day. By early afternoon, the tone had shifted from urgent to accusatory. Mom, 1:35 p.m. Your silence is very disappointing. This is a family matter that requires your input. Dad, 2:15 p.m. Your mother has been trying to reach you all day. The least you could do is respond. Melissa, 3:08 p.m. Seriously, you cannot take 5 minutes to call back. Some of us have real problems to deal with. It was the messages from late afternoon that revealed the actual situation, and they hit me like a physical blow. Mom, 4:22 p.m. Since you will not respond, we have made the decision without you. Ryan and Melissa need to move in temporarily. Ryan will be using your bedroom. We are converting the garage for when you visit. This is what family does for each other. Melissa, 5:10 p.m. Mom told you about the room situation. Ryan lost his job again, and our landlord is selling the building. We need to save money and help with Mom and Dad. You are never here anyway, so stop being selfish. Dad, 5:45 p.m. Your mother is upset that you have not called back. Ryan is already moving some things in. The garage will be perfectly fine for your visits. You only come home twice a year anyway. The final message had arrived just 30 minutes before I checked my phone. Mom, 7:30 p.m. Your stuff is in the garage now. Ryan needs your room more than you do. Family has to stick together in hard times. Call me when you decide to be reasonable. I stared at my phone in disbelief. They had cleared out my room without permission, boxed up my belongings, and relegated me to the unfinished garage, all while expecting my agreement and support. The assumption of compliance was perhaps the most shocking aspect. There had been no real attempt at discussion, just a notification of decisions already made. The missed calls painted a similar picture. There were voice messages ranging from concerned to cajoling to outright angry. My mother's final voicemail delivered the coup de grace. "Jason, your silence speaks volumes about your priorities. Ryan and Melissa are family too, and they need our help right now. The garage is perfectly habitable, and we can add a space heater for winter visits. This is what families do for each other. Your sister would do the same for you." I sat at my desk, stunned by the audacity of it all. The room itself was not the issue. I had my own place and rarely stayed overnight during visits. It was the complete disregard for me, as an individual, the cavalier treatment of my belongings, and the assumption that I would accept this treatment without question. My first instinct was to call immediately and express my outrage, but something stopped me. Experience had taught me that heated responses to my parents rarely led to productive outcomes. Instead, I texted my best friend Marcus, someone who had witnessed my family dynamics for years. "Need perspective. Parents gave my room to brother-in-law, without asking moved my stuff to garage, and are now mad I am not grateful. Am I overreacting?" Marcus called immediately. "Dude, are you serious? That is messed up. They just decided this today, and expected you to be available to consult on their schedule while you are working." His indignation helped clarify my thoughts. This was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of disrespect that had characterized our relationship for years. My feelings and boundaries had never been given the same consideration as those of my sister or her husband. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked after I explained the full situation. "I need time to think," I replied. "Calling them tonight would just lead to a shouting match." "Whatever you decide, remember this is not normal behavior," Marcus said before hanging up. "Healthy families discuss major changes. They do not demand compliance and punish questions." I spent the rest of the evening in my penthouse, surrounded by the life I had built for myself, contemplating how to respond to this latest family crisis. The irony was not lost on me. While my parents were clearing out my childhood bedroom to make space for my unemployed brother-in-law, I was sitting in a penthouse I had purchased through years of hard work in the career they had. Dismissed. As I went to bed that night, I made a decision. I would drive to my parents' house the following day to see the situation firsthand and have a long overdue conversation about respect and boundaries. The time for avoiding conflict to keep the peace was over. The 3-hour drive to my parents' house the next morning gave me plenty of time to organize my thoughts. I had decided to approach the situation calmly but firmly, addressing not just the room issue but the pattern of disrespect it represented. By the time I pulled into the familiar driveway, I felt prepared for whatever awaited me. What I was not prepared for was the sight that greeted me as I approached the front door. Through the living room window, I could see Ryan carrying what appeared to be his clothing into my childhood bedroom. The door was open, and from my vantage point I could see that the room had already been transformed. My desk was gone, replaced by Ryan's exercise equipment. The bookshelves that had held my computer science textbooks now displayed Ryan's sports memorabilia. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. My mother answered, her initial expression of surprise quickly masked by a defensive stance. "Jason, we were not expecting you today. You could have called first." Her tone suggested I was the one breaching protocol. "I thought it would be better to discuss the situation in person," I replied, maintaining my composure. "May I come in?" She stepped aside reluctantly. Inside, my father sat in his recliner watching a baseball game. He nodded in acknowledgement but did not get up. "So you finally decided to respond," he said, muting the television. "Your mother was upset all day yesterday." Before I could respond, Melissa emerged from my former bedroom. "Oh, you actually showed up. Drama as usual, Jason. You could have just called back like a normal person." "I was in meetings all day," I explained, though I knew the justification would fall on deaf ears. "But that is not the point. The point is that you made a major decision affecting my belongings without even consulting me." My mother crossed her arms. "Consulting you? We tried calling you dozens of times. You were too busy with your computer job to pick up the phone. And if I had answered, would it have been a discussion, or would you have simply informed me of what you had already decided? The uncomfortable silence confirmed my suspicion. Ryan and Melissa need our help right now, my mother finally said, her voice taking on the martyr tone I knew well. Ryan lost his position at the accounting firm. The new manager had unreasonable expectations. Ryan appeared in the hallway looking uncomfortable but not particularly apologetic. Hey, Jason. Tough break about the room, but we really appreciate your parents helping us out. And you needed specifically my room because... I prompted. My father entered the conversation. It is the largest bedroom besides the master. Ryan and Melissa need the space. They have a lot of things. You are successful now with your fancy apartment in the city. You do not even live here anymore. That is not the point, I countered. The point is respect. You could have called me last week, explained the situation, and asked how I felt about it. Instead, you waited until the last minute, demanded an immediate response during my workday, and then acted without my input. Our house, our rules, my father replied, falling back on the phrase he had used throughout my childhood to end discussions. We do not need your permission to use the rooms in our own home. Melissa stepped forward, her expression self-righteous. Jason, not everything is about you. Ryan and I cannot afford rent right now. The landlord sold our building and we have 30 days to move out. Ryan is between jobs and my salary at the store barely covers groceries. Where were we supposed to go? I understand you are in a difficult situation, I said, maintaining my calm. And I would have been happy to help find a solution. But this was not about helping you. This was about making decisions without respect for me or my belongings. What belongings? My mother scoffed. Old trophies and computer books. We packed everything carefully. It is all in the garage. Let me see, I said, moving toward the side door that led to the garage. What I found there sent a wave of shock through me. My belongings had not been carefully packed as my mother claimed. They had been hastily thrown into garbage bags and cardboard boxes. My debate trophies were piled haphazardly in a corner, one with its figurine broken off. The computer where I had written my first programs lay on its side atop a box, the case cracked from careless handling. Most disturbing was the discovery of several black garbage bags by the door. Opening one, I found my childhood journals, science fair certificates, and the programming books I had saved for years. They were positioned as if ready to be thrown out with the trash. I returned to the living room, anger now threatening to overtake my calm demeanor. You were planning to throw away my belongings. We needed to make space, my mother replied defensively. Those old papers and books were just collecting dust. Those old papers included my first awards in programming, the career that you have dismissed for years but that now pays for many of the things you need. My father waved his hand dismissively. If they are so important, take them with you. We were doing you a favor by clearing out childish things. As we argued, Ryan emerged from my room wearing one of my old college sweatshirts. Seeing my expression, he shrugged. Your mom said you would not mind if I used some of the clothes you left behind. No point in them sitting in a closet. That was when my sister delivered what she clearly thought would be the final word on the matter. Jason, we need you to chip in for the garage conversion. Dad got an estimate, and it will cost about $3,000 to make it livable for your visits. Since you are the one who will be using it, you should cover the cost. The audacity of the request left me momentarily speechless. They had moved my belongings without permission, given my room to my unemployed brother-in-law, nearly thrown out my mementos, and now expected me to pay for the privilege of sleeping in the garage during visits. My father misinterpreted my silence as consideration. And while we are discussing finances, Ryan has a business idea that could really take off with some initial investment. Nothing major. $20,000 or so to get started. With your technology salary, that should be manageable. That was the final straw. Years of dismissal, disrespect, and double standards crystallized in that moment of breathtaking entitlement. They had never supported my career choices, had actively undermined my confidence at every turn, and now viewed me primarily as a funding source for their preferred child and her struggling husband. Let me make sure I understand correctly, I said, my voice steady despite my inner turmoil. You want me to pay $3,000 to convert the garage where you have banished me after giving my room to Ryan. Additionally, you want me to invest $20,000 in a business venture for Ryan who has lost over. How many jobs is it now? That is not fair, Melissa interjected. Ryan has had bad luck with employers. Not everyone gets special treatment in the tech world like you do. This is not about Ryan's employment history, I replied. This is about respect, something that has been consistently lacking in how this family treats me. My mother's expression hardened. If you cannot help your sister in her time of need, then perhaps you should reconsider what family means to you. After everything we have done for you, what exactly have you done for me? I asked quietly. You dismissed my career choices, minimized my achievements, and now you have disposed of my belongings without my consent. At what point in this relationship was I treated with the same respect you automatically give to Melissa and Ryan? The question hung in the air unanswerable because its premise was undeniable. If this is how you feel, my father finally said, then perhaps you should take your remaining things and go. Family means supporting each other, not keeping score. That is exactly my point, I replied. Support in this family has only ever flowed in one direction. With that, I went back to the garage and began gathering the items that mattered most to me. The journals, certificates, and a few mementos that represented important milestones. As I worked, the magnitude of the break that was occurring settled over me. This was not just about a bedroom or possessions. It was about recognizing a fundamental dysfunction that had shaped our family dynamics for decades. The drive back to my penthouse was both emotionally exhausting and strangely liberating. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had directly confronted the inequality that characterized my family relationships. I had named the disrespect that had been normalized for so long, and in doing so, I had shifted something fundamental in our dynamic. As I carried the salvaged boxes of my childhood into my penthouse, the contrast between my current life and my family's perception of me had never been more stark. The spacious living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline represented everything I had built for myself. Despite not because of my family's support, my phone had been buzzing throughout the drive home. Messages from my mother oscillated between guilt trips. I cannot believe you would speak to your father that way, and attempts to minimize what had happened. You are overreacting as usual. My sister's messages were more directly accusatory. Thanks for ruining everything. Mom has been crying since you left. I placed the phone on my kitchen counter and made a decision that was long overdue. I would take some time away from my family to establish clear boundaries. The first step was financial. For years, I had been quietly supporting my parents in various ways. I paid their cell phone bill as part of my family plan. I covered the difference when the hardware store had difficult months. I had even been making their car payments for the past year after my father complained about the interest rate on their loan. These financial entanglements had created an unhealthy dynamic where my support was expected but never acknowledged. It was time to disentangle myself, not out of spite, but as a necessary step toward a healthier relationship, if such a thing was even possible. I spent the weekend making calls and separating our financial affairs. I removed my parents from my cell phone family plan, transferred the car loan back to their name, and called the utility companies to remove my auto payment information. These were not punitive actions, but necessary ones. I could not continue enabling a relationship where I was simultaneously taken for granted and disrespected. My friends provided crucial support during this difficult transition. Marcus came over with takeout on Saturday evening, listening as I processed the events of the past few days. I have been thinking about this for a while, he said, as we sat on my balcony. Your family has always had this weird dynamic, where they dismiss your career while benefiting from it. Remember when your mom complained about your computer job while using the iPhone you bought her? Elena, another close friend who had witnessed many of my family's struggles, called to check in after I texted her about the situation. This is not about the bedroom, she insisted. This is about them never seeing you clearly. They created a narrative about you as the less successful child, and they cannot adjust it even when reality contradicts them completely. Their perspectives helped reinforce that my reaction was not excessive or unwarranted. For years I had downplayed the dysfunction in my family relationships, making excuses for behavior that would be unacceptable from anyone else. The bedroom incident had simply made the pattern too obvious to ignore any longer. The first test of my new boundaries came sooner than expected. For 2 weeks, there was relative silence from my family aside from occasional passive-aggressive messages that I chose not to engage with. Then on a Tuesday evening, my phone lit up with a call from my father, the first direct contact since our confrontation. I answered with a neutral hello, unsure what to expect. "Jason," my father began, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "We seem to be having some issues with the utilities. Your mother tried to call the electric company, and they said the automatic payments have stopped." "Yes," I confirmed. "I have separated our accounts. I will no longer be covering those bills." There was a moment of stunned silence before he responded, his voice rising. "You cannot just cut us off like that. Your mother and I are on a fixed income. The store has been struggling, and with Ryan and Melissa staying with us now, our expenses have increased." "I understand that finances are tight," I replied calmly, "but I cannot continue supporting a household where I am not treated with respect. This is about the bedroom again. You are punishing your mother over a silly room." "This is not about punishment," I explained. "This is about establishing healthy boundaries. For years I have provided financial support, while my career choices were dismissed and my belongings were treated carelessly. That dynamic needs to change." The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with my father declaring that I was no longer the son he had raised and hanging up abruptly. Minutes later, my mother called, her voice tearful as she described how the electricity might be shut off if the bill was not paid immediately. "Mom," I said gently but firmly, "you and Dad have managed the household finances for decades. You knew these bills existed. The fact that you did not budget for them once I removed my support indicates a larger problem that I cannot solve for you." Through mutual friends and extended family, I learned more about the situation at my parents' house in the weeks that followed. Ryan's latest business idea, an app for connecting homeowners with local handymen, had failed to secure any additional investors. My parents had apparently contributed several $1,000s from their retirement savings money that was now gone with nothing to show for it. Melissa had reduced her hours at the hardware store, claiming the stress of the situation was affecting her health. This further strained my parents' finances, as they were now supporting 3 adults with only my father's partial retirement income and the dwindling profits from the store. The electricity was indeed shut off for 48 hours before my parents managed to negotiate a payment plan. This information came from my Aunt Linda, who called to give me updates, and to my surprise express her support. "Your parents have enabled your sister for years," she confided. "Many of us in the family have seen it, but no one wanted to interfere. You were always expected to be the responsible one, even when you were younger than Melissa." Her validation of my experience was unexpectedly emotional. For so long I had wondered if my perception of the family dynamic was accurate, or if I was being overly sensitive. Hearing a family elder confirm the pattern helped solidify my resolve to maintain the boundaries I had established. 3 weeks after our confrontation, the calls and messages from my family began to change in tone. My mother's texts became apologetic rather than accusatory. My father left a voicemail acknowledging that things could have been handled better regarding your room. My sister sent a message suggesting we clear the air and start fresh. The shift was remarkable, but not entirely surprising. With their financial cushion removed and the reality of their situation becoming apparent, reconciliation and the potential resumption of my support had become a priority. I approached these overtures with caution, aware that genuine change would require more than temporary remorse motivated by financial necessity. The pattern had been established over decades. It would not be resolved through a single conversation or apology. As I considered how to respond to my family's changed attitude, I focused on building the life I wanted, one defined by mutual respect in all relationships, clear boundaries, and the freedom to pursue my own path without constant to my own path. Justification. The journey ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years I felt fully aligned with my own values and needs. After a month of limited contact, I received a call from my mother that seemed different from her previous attempts at communication. Her voice lacked the underlying accusation that had characterized our recent interactions. "Jason, I have been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "Your father and I miss you. We would like to have a family dinner this Sunday just to talk things through. No pressure, no expectations, just family time to clear the air." I hesitated, wary of stepping back into old patterns. "Will Melissa and Ryan be there?" "Yes, they are still staying with us. But this dinner is about healing our relationship with you. Everyone agrees that things got out of hand." Against my better judgment, I agreed to attend. Part of me hoped that the confrontation had genuinely triggered reflection and change. Perhaps with clear boundaries established, we could begin building a healthier dynamic. I arrived at my parents' house on Sunday afternoon with cautious optimism. My mother greeted me with a hug that felt almost desperate in its intensity. My father offered a handshake and a gruff, "Good to see you, son," as close to warmth as he typically displayed. The first warning sign came when I glanced toward the hallway and saw that my former bedroom door was decorated with a wooden plaque reading Melissa and Ryan's room. The garage I noticed through a window remained untouched, still filled with boxes and lawn equipment with no sign of the conversion they had mentioned. Dinner began pleasantly enough with neutral conversations about the weather and local news. My mother had prepared all my childhood favorites: pot roast mashed potatoes and apple pie for dessert. The effort was transparent but appreciated. As we ate, however, the conversation gradually shifted toward financial matters. My father mentioned the hardware store's continuing struggles. My mother lamented the rising cost of groceries now that they were feeding 4 adults. These comments were delivered with sideways glances in my direction, testing whether I would offer assistance. I maintained polite engagement without taking the bait, redirecting conversations when they veered too obviously toward financial concerns. This dance continued until dessert was served, when Melissa cleared her throat for what was clearly a planned announcement. Since we are all together as a family, she began, looking at Ryan with a rehearsed smile. "We wanted to share some news. We are expecting a baby." The announcement was met with exclamations of joy from my parents. My mother clasped her hands in delight while my father clapped Ryan on the shoulder with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. "Congratulations," I offered sincerely. "That is wonderful news." "Thank you, Melissa," replied her expression, shifting to something more calculated. "Of course, this changes our situation somewhat. We will definitely need more space now, especially once the baby arrives. And with Ryan still job hunting and my reduced hours at the store, we are concerned about finances." And there it was, the real purpose of the reconciliation dinner. Not to address the disrespect or establish healthier boundaries, but to leverage a new circumstance for additional support. My father leaned forward. "Jason, your sister is going to need help during this time. Family has to come together for moments like this. We were thinking," my mother added, her voice gentle but insistent, "that perhaps you could reconsider helping with the bills again, just temporarily until Ryan finds a suitable position. And maybe you could assist with some baby expenses. Cribs and strollers are so expensive these days." The manipulation was so transparent that I almost laughed. They had invited me to dinner under the pretense of reconciliation, only to ambush me with new financial expectations, disguised as family obligation. "I noticed the garage is still untouched," I observed, changing the subject. "I thought you were planning to convert it into a space for me." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Well, with the baby news, we might need to rethink that plan. The garage might make a good playroom eventually, but that is a discussion for another time." "I see," I replied, the pieces falling into place. "So my room is permanently Melissa and Ryan's. Now the garage will become a playroom, and my role is to fund all of this while having no space of my own in the family home." "Do not be so dramatic," Melissa snapped. "This is about a baby, your niece or nephew. Are you really going to make this about bedroom arrangements?" "This is not about bedrooms," I explained calmly. "This is about patterns of behavior. I came here tonight hoping that our previous conversation had led to some reflection about how this family treats me. Instead, I find that nothing has changed except the strategy for asking for money." My father's expression darkened. "So you will not help your sister? After all we have done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, echoing the question from our previous confrontation. When have you supported my choices or celebrated my successes? When have you treated my career as valuable rather than dismissing it as playing with computers? We gave you a home, my mother interjected. We fed you, clothed you, educated you. Those are basic parental responsibilities, I countered. They are not special favors that require lifelong debt. Ryan, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Look, Jason, I know things have been tense, but with the baby coming, we need to put aside our differences. Your sister is going to be a mother. Does that not mean anything to you? Of course it does, I replied, and I will be happy to be involved in my niece or nephew's life. But that involvement cannot come with financial strings attached or be used as leverage to extract support. The facade of reconciliation crumbled entirely at that point. My father accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. My mother retreated into tears and guilt-inducing comments about family loyalty. Melissa alternated between anger and performative distress about the stress affecting her pregnancy. As the accusations flew, I maintained a calm exterior that belied my internal disappointment. I had genuinely hoped for change, for some acknowledgement of the dysfunctional patterns that had characterized our family for years. Instead, I found the same manipulative behaviors simply adapted to new circumstances. I think it is time for me to leave, I finally said, standing from the table. This dinner was not about reconciliation. It was about re-establishing access to my financial support. How dare you, my mother gasped. We invited you here out of love. If that were true, I replied, then my refusal to provide money would not result in this reaction. In a healthy relationship, love is not conditional on financial support. As I walked toward the door, Melissa delivered what she clearly thought would be a devastating parting shot. If you walk out now, do not expect to be part of this baby's life. I turned back one last time. That threat perfectly illustrates the problem. You view relationships as transactional. Access to my niece or nephew is being used as leverage for financial gain. That is not family. That is manipulation. The drive home was heavy with finality. I had given the reconciliation a genuine chance, hoping that clear boundaries might lead to healthier interactions. Instead, I had found that the patterns were too deeply entrenched for simple solutions. As painful as the realization was, it also brought clarity. Moving forward would require acceptance that the family dynamic might never change. My options were to continue participating in the dysfunction, or to build a life defined by healthier relationships, even if that meant creating distance from my family of origin. That night I made the difficult decision to temporarily block my family's numbers. It was not a permanent solution, but I needed space to process the evening's events without the constant pressure of their messages and calls. The boundaries I had established were not being respected, and sometimes the only way to enforce a boundary is to physically remove the possibility of its violation. As I looked out at the city lights from my penthouse window, I felt a complex mixture of grief and resolve. The family I had always hoped for might not exist, but I could still create connections based on mutual respect and genuine care. The path forward would be challenging but necessary for my own well-being. The months following the failed reconciliation dinner were transformative in ways I had not anticipated. Without the constant drain of family drama, I found myself with emotional energy to invest in personal growth and meaningful relationships. The first step in my healing journey was finding a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. Dr. Lipton helped me understand that my family's behavior followed classic patterns of enmeshment and enabling. Our weekly sessions became a space to untangle years of conditioning that had left me feeling responsible for my family's well-being while receiving little support in return. What you are describing is a common dynamic in families with an identified strong one and an identified needy one, she explained during one particularly insightful session. From an early age you were cast as self-sufficient and capable while your sister was viewed as requiring additional help and resources. These roles become self-reinforcing over time. Understanding the pattern did not immediately eliminate the guilt and doubt that surfaced regularly. There were nights when I questioned my decision to establish firm boundaries, wondering if I was overreacting or being unnecessarily harsh. Doctor. Lipton helped me recognize these thoughts as the result of years of conditioning rather than accurate reflections of the situation. Healthy guilt motivates repair. When we have genuinely wronged someone, she noted, what you are experiencing is toxic guilt, the false belief that setting appropriate boundaries is somehow harmful to others. As my perspective shifted, I began reconnecting with extended family members who had witnessed the dynamic from the outside. My Aunt Linda became an unexpected source of support and validation. During a long phone conversation, she shared observations that confirmed my experience was not imagined or exaggerated. Your parents always had different expectations for you and Melissa, she confirmed. When you were 16 and wanted to attend that summer coding camp, they said it was too expensive. But the same year, they spent twice as much on Melissa's shopping spree before college. Many of us noticed, but it wasn't our place to interfere. These conversations with extended family helped me realize that I wasn't severing all family connections, just redefining which relationships deserved investment. My cousin Thomas, once mentioned by my father as the ideal path I should have followed, reached out unexpectedly after hearing about our rift. I always admired how you stuck to your passion despite Uncle Frank's pressure, he admitted. The hardware store is struggling and I'm trapped in a career I never wanted. You were smarter than all of us by following your own path. Perhaps the most significant development came when my younger cousin Alex contacted me seeking career advice. At 22, he was facing similar family pressure to follow conventional paths rather than pursuing his interest in digital marketing. Everyone says it's not a real career, he explained during our first video call, but I see the potential and I'm good at it. I just don't know how to handle the family criticism. Our conversations evolved into a mentoring relationship that benefited us both. I helped Alex develop skills and make industry connections while his situation gave me perspective on my own journey. Unlike my relationship with my immediate family, our interactions were characterized by mutual respect and appreciation. You're the only person in the family who doesn't treat me like a kid with unrealistic dreams, Alex told me after I helped him secure his first professional position. You actually listen and take me seriously. As months passed, I built stronger connections with friends who had become chosen family. Holidays, once a source of stress and obligation, transformed into genuine celebrations. For Thanksgiving, I hosted a dinner for friends who couldn't travel home or chose not to. Christmas included a ski trip with Marcus and 3 other close friends. These gatherings lacked the undercurrent of tension that had characterized family holidays. There were no passive-aggressive comments, no tallying of perceived slights, no expectations beyond enjoying each other's company. I found myself relaxing in ways that had never been possible during family events. Professionally, the absence of family drama allowed me to focus more fully on my career. I spearheaded a major project that expanded our company's market share and resulted in a promotion to Chief Innovation Officer. The irony wasn't lost on me. The career my parents had dismissed as playing with computers had provided me with financial security and professional fulfillment beyond anything the family hardware store could have offered. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally received updates about my immediate family's situation. The hardware store had continued its decline, eventually closing 2 of the 3 locations. Ryan had cycled through several more jobs, none lasting more than a few months. Melissa had given birth to a baby boy with my parents, assuming primary financial responsibility for many of the expenses. These updates no longer triggered the guilt and responsibility they once would have. I had come to understand that my financial support had enabled dysfunction rather than helping. By removing that support, I had forced a confrontation with reality that, while painful, was necessary for any possibility of genuine change. 6 months after our last interaction, my mother sent an email that stood out from her previous communications. Instead of guilt or accusations, it contained a simple request: we would like to meet on neutral ground to talk. No expectations, no requests. Just talking. I considered the invitation, carefully discussing it with Dr. Lipton before deciding to agree to a meeting at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. The location was symbolic. Neither their territory nor mine, but a neutral space where we could interact as adults without the loaded history of the family home. As I drove to the meeting, I reminded myself of the boundaries I had established and the progress I had made. Whatever happened at this encounter, I would not sacrifice my well-being for the sake of artificial harmony. True reconciliation, if it was possible, would need to be built on honesty and mutual respect, rather than the pretense that had characterized our previous attempt. 1 year after the bedroom incident that had catalyzed such profound changes in my life, I sat across from my parents in a quiet corner of Riverside Cafe. The neutral location had been a non-negotiable condition of my agreement to meet. My mother looked older than I, remembered lines of stress evident around her eyes. My father, always robust and commanding in my childhood memories, seemed diminished somehow, his shoulders slightly stooped. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." My mother began, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. "It means a lot." I nodded, waiting to hear their purpose, rather than filling the silence with reassurances. My father cleared his throat. "The past year has been difficult. The store is now down to just the original location. Business has been slow." I braced myself for what I assumed would follow. Another financial request disguised as reconciliation. But my father surprised me by continuing in a different direction. "That is not why we asked to meet," he said, seeming to read my thoughts. "We are managing. Your mother has taken a part-time job at the library, and I have reduced expenses at the store. We are here because—" He faltered, looking to my mother for support. "We miss you," my mother finished simply, "and we have been doing a lot of thinking about the things you said, about respect and boundaries." The conversation that followed was unlike any we had ever had. For perhaps the first time, my parents spoke without the defensive posture that had characterized all our previous interactions. They acknowledged, hesitantly at first, then with increasing candor, the pattern of favoritism that had shaped our family dynamic. "We always thought Melissa needed more help," my mother admitted. "You seemed so capable, so independent from an early age. It became easy to lean on that, to expect you to manage while we focused on her struggles." My father, less comfortable with emotional vulnerability, nevertheless offered his own acknowledgement. "I did not understand your interest in computers. I wanted you to follow my path because it was what I knew. When you succeeded in something I did not understand, it was challenging to my pride." Their admissions were not perfect. There were moments of justification, attempts to explain rather than simply acknowledge. But beneath the imperfection was something new, a genuine attempt to see me clearly, perhaps for the first time. "We are not asking for money," my father stated firmly. "We are not asking you to forget what happened. We just want a chance to do better moving forward." I had prepared myself for many scenarios, but this humble request caught me off guard. I had expected to maintain my defenses against manipulation, not to navigate what appeared to be genuine remorse. "What about Melissa and Ryan?" I asked. "Where do they stand in all this?" My mother sighed. "They are still living with us. The baby, your nephew Thomas, is 7 months old now. Ryan has found steady work at a warehouse. Not what he wanted, but reliable income. Melissa is coming to terms with certain realities. They do not know we are meeting you," my father added. "This is about our relationship with you, not about them." We talked for nearly 3 hours, working through years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. There were difficult moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, my mother's instinct to minimize my father's tendency toward authoritative pronouncements. But each time they caught themselves making visible efforts to listen rather than defend. Near the end of our conversation, my mother reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. "We would like to be part of your life again in whatever way you feel comfortable. We know we cannot undo the past, but perhaps we can build something new." I considered their request carefully. The progress they had shown was meaningful, but I was also aware that lasting change would require consistent effort over time. The boundaries I had established had been necessary for my well-being, and I was not willing to sacrifice them for the sake of an easy reconciliation. "I would like that too," I finally said. "But it needs to be different from before. I cannot go back to the old dynamic." "We understand," my father nodded. "We are not asking for that." We agreed to start small, occasional phone calls, perhaps dinner once a month. No financial entanglements, no expectations beyond mutual respect. It was a tentative beginning, but one built on a more honest foundation than we had ever had before. As for Melissa and Ryan, I expressed willingness to meet my nephew eventually, but made it clear that my relationship with them would need to evolve separately from my relationship with my parents. The enmeshed family system that had defined us for so long was being dismantled, replaced by clearer boundaries and individual connections. In the months that followed that initial meeting, we slowly rebuilt our relationship. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns resurfaced and had to be addressed. But there was also genuine progress. My father attended a technology conference where I was a featured speaker, making a visible effort to understand the career he had dismissed for so long. My mother began asking questions about my life and interests, without immediately steering conversations back to Melissa or family obligations. Most significantly, they respected the boundaries I maintained around financial support. When the store faced another difficult quarter, they informed me of the situation but explicitly stated that they were not asking for assistance. When I eventually offered a small business loan with clear terms and repayment expectations, it was my choice rather than their demand. The journey toward a healthier family dynamic continues to this day. It is imperfect, sometimes frustrating, but ultimately worthwhile. Through this challenging experience, I have learned lessons that have transformed my approach to all relationships. First, I learned that family is defined by respect, not merely by blood. The DNA we share creates a connection, but it is our choices and behaviors that determine whether that connection is healthy or harmful. Sometimes the most loving choice is to establish distance until respect becomes possible. Second, I discovered that helping others should never come at the expense of your own well-being. True generosity flows from abundance, not obligation. When support is given from resentment or fear, it damages both the giver and the receiver. Third, I recognize the importance of recognizing manipulation tactics and standing firm against them. The guilt, obligation, and fear that had kept me tethered to unhealthy dynamics were powerful, but ultimately could not withstand the clarity that came with distance and perspective. Fourth, I embraced the transformative power of self-worth and boundaries. By valuing myself enough to require respectful treatment, I changed not only my own experience, but ultimately the family system itself. Finally, I learned that forgiveness does not require forgetting. I have forgiven my parents for the patterns that cause so much pain, but I maintain awareness of our history to prevent its repetition. Forgiveness has freed me from bitterness without requiring me to abandon discernment. Looking back at the bedroom incident that triggered this journey, I can now see it as a necessary catalyst. The shock of such blatant disregard broke through the normalization that had allowed the dysfunction to continue unchallenged for decades. Sometimes it takes a dramatic event to illuminate patterns that have been hiding in plain sight. As I sit in my penthouse today, I feel gratitude for the difficult journey that led to growth. My life is richer for the authentic connections I have built with friends who became family and family members who learned to relate to me authentically. The path was painful but necessary, leading to a peace that would have been impossible without confronting the dysfunction directly. Has your family ever expected you to sacrifice your boundaries for their convenience? Have you struggled with standing up for yourself against family pressure? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about establishing healthy boundaries and finding personal strength. Remember, sometimes the most courageous act of love is saying no to toxic patterns. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in your own path toward authentic relationships built on mutual respect.